The wind that morning had a restless bite to it. Not sharp enough to feel like winter, but just enough to make you pull your jacket tighter. Gray clouds crowded the sky as if they were struggling to hold back tears of rain. Streets were still wet from the early drizzle, and the faint scent of wet earth and diesel lingered in the air. Nathan adjusted his scarf and quickened his pace, boots splashing through shallow puddles as he hurried across the park shortcut to the shelter. That's when he saw it. A flash of matted fur slinking between the empty picnic benches. At first glance, it looked like any other stray, ribs visible under a coat dulled by mud and exhaustion. Head down, tail dragging low. Nathan stopped in his tracks. The dog froze too, its dark, watchful eyes locking onto his, wary but not aggressive. More like tired, defeated, as if the world had wrung it out and left it to dry in the cold wind. Nathan's heart squeezed. He'd seen his share of strays. Running this small-town shelter taught him as much. But something about this one felt heavier. He crouched low, keeping his movements slow, non-threatening. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, voice soft against the breeze. "Where did you come from, huh?" The dog didn't move at first. It just stood there, as though weighing its options. Run? Hide? Or trust this stranger? When it finally took a hesitant step forward, Nathan saw its limp. Right hind leg, swollen, stiff. There was a raw wound on its side, like it had brushed up against barbed wire or worse. His gut twisted. Carefully, he reached into his pocket, pulling out the remains of his sandwich from earlier. Tuna. He broke off a small piece and gently tossed it toward the dog. The animal sniffed the air, eyes still glued to Nathan. And then, hunger overriding fear, it stepped closer and devoured the morsel in 2 quick bites. "That's it," Nathan encouraged, lowering his hand with the rest of the sandwich. "Come on, I've got more where that came from." It took a few tense minutes, but finally the dog came close enough for Nathan to see its collar, or rather the remains of one. Frayed leather, almost fused with the dirty fur. His breath caught. Not a stray then, at least not always. His fingers trembled as he carefully looped the emergency leash from his bag around the dog's neck. It didn't fight, it didn't even flinch. It just stood there, as if saying, "Take me anywhere but here." Nathan swallowed past the lump in his throat. "I got you now." Little did he know, this wasn't just a rescue. This was the beginning of a story that would shake him to his very core. The rain finally gave in to gravity as Nathan pushed open the shelter doors, droplets pattering softly against the tin roof. The familiar scent of damp fur, antiseptic, and old newspapers filled the air. Volunteers moved like clockwork, tending to crates and feeding stations, but all eyes briefly flicked toward him as he carried the limp dog in his arms. "Another stray." Carla, the vet tech, called out, already pulling on her gloves. "Not exactly," Nathan replied, laying the dog down on the examination table. His voice was tight, a knot forming in his chest. "This one's different." Carla approached, her brows knitting together as she examined the animal. "Poor thing," she murmured. Her hands were gentle, running over the dog's battered body. "Looks like he's been out there for weeks. Infection's setting in on that leg." Nathan couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at his insides. "Check for a chip?" "Of course." The scanner beeped to life in her hand, and for a moment the room felt smaller, quieter. Nathan watched her wave the device over the dog's neck and shoulders, his breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. Maybe a blank result, another lost soul with no trace of its past. But then the scanner gave a sharp, urgent beep. Carla's eyes widened. "Wait," she said, narrowing her focus on the scanner. "There's something here." The screen lit up with a string of numbers. A registered ID. Nathan felt his heart skip. "Whose is it?" Carla's fingers moved fast, typing the digits into the database. A moment stretched into forever. Her face, usually so composed, began to pale as the result flashed onto the screen. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She read it again and again. Finally, she looked up at Nathan, her voice no louder than a whisper. This dog, Nathan, this dog was declared dead 2 years ago. The room seemed to spin. Nathan felt as if the walls themselves had tilted under the weight of that sentence. His eyes snapped back to the dog lying motionless on the table, its chest rising and falling in weak, shallow breaths. How is that possible? Carla shook her head, at a loss. Nathan stared down at the battered creature. What nightmare had this poor soul survived? What story was buried beneath the scars and the sorrow? And more importantly, who had lost him 2 years ago? And who had lied? Rain lashed against the shelter windows as Nathan paced the cramped office, heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. Carla, still visibly shaken, clutched the printout from the database as though it might disappear if she loosened her grip. I cross-checked it 3 times, she said, her voice tight with disbelief. The registry is clear. The dog's name is Max. Owner, Emily Harper. Nathan's brow furrowed. The name stirred something in his memory, like a half-forgotten dream. Wait, Emily Harper? His eyes darkened with recognition. Isn't that the woman from Greenridge? The house fire? Carla swallowed hard, nodding. Yes. The file says she lost her home, and her family pet. Max was presumed dead in the blaze. Nathan's chest tightened as the memories resurfaced. He remembered the news report vividly. A freak electrical fire had torn through Emily Harper's old cottage. Flames engulfed the house faster than emergency crews could respond. Emily had escaped, barely. But Max, there had been no sign of him. The charred remains of the house yielded no clues, and in the days that followed, the search had been called off. People assumed the worst. But here he was, alive. Nathan's throat felt raw. This changes everything. Carla nodded. If Emily's still in town, she deserves to know. Nathan didn't waste a second. His hands trembled as he dialed the number listed in the database. Each ring felt like an eternity. Finally, a soft, wary voice answered. Hello? Hi, is this Emily Harper? Nathan forced his voice to remain steady. A beat of silence. Yes, who's calling? This is Nathan Kessler from the Greenwood Animal Shelter, he said gently. I think we found someone who belongs to you. For a moment, there was nothing but the quiet sound of her breathing. Then, her voice cracked. Max, she whispered. Nathan's eyes stung. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Yes. Emily's car screeched into the shelter driveway less than an hour later, mud splattering her tires as she rushed from behind the wheel. Her eyes were wide, raw with hope and fear tangled together. Her breath hitched as she pushed open the door, scanning the room as if afraid she'd wake from a cruel dream. Nathan stepped forward to meet her, his expression softening. Emily? She barely managed a nod, her gaze darting past him toward the recovery room. Is he really? Come, Nathan said, leading her with quiet urgency. As they entered the dimly lit room, her breath caught in her throat at the sight of the frail body lying on the cot. The moment her eyes landed on Max, her hands flew to her mouth to stifle a sob. Max, she choked out, her voice trembling with disbelief and grief. She dropped to her knees beside him, reaching out a shaky hand. At her touch, something miraculous happened. Max's eyes, dulled by exhaustion, fluttered open. Recognition flared in his gaze like the flicker of a long-lost flame. A soft whimper escaped him. Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks as she cradled his face in her palms. It's me, Maxie, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm here. I never stopped looking for you. Max, with the last of his strength, inched closer to her warmth, resting his head in her lap. Nathan felt his throat tighten at the sight. Even Carla, who had seen her share of reunions, brushed away a tear, But despite the overwhelming emotion, a shadow lingered over the moment. Carla cleared her throat gently. "Emily, he's in rough shape. The infection is serious, and we don't know how much time he has." Emily's eyes filled with resolve, even through her tears. "Then, whatever time he has left, I'll be right here." And as she bent over Max, whispering words of love and comfort, Nathan silently vowed to do everything in his power to give them both a fighting chance. The shelter felt different that night. Quieter. Heavy. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Emily hadn't left Max's side for a second. She sat curled on the cold linoleum floor, her arms gently draped over him, as if her very touch could anchor him to this world. Outside, the rain had softened into a misty drizzle, tapping against the windows like a metronome keeping time. Nathan and Carla worked tirelessly around her, speaking in hushed voices, moving with both urgency and care. Antibiotics, fluids, warm blankets, they threw everything they had at the fragile hope flickering in that recovery room. Emily never asked for details, but her eyes told the story. She understood the odds, the risks, the fragile thread they were all clinging to. Still, she whispered to Max as though her words alone could stitch him back together. "I thought I lost you," she murmured, stroking the matted fur between his ears. Her fingers trembled, but her voice carried quiet strength. "I thought you were gone forever." Max's eyes fluttered open every so often, seeking her face like a compass to the familiar. When he found her, there was a faint, almost imperceptible wag of his tail. Weak, but there. Carla stepped closer, checking Max's vitals. Her brows pinched with concern, but she didn't speak. Not yet. Nathan caught her glance. It wasn't good, but it wasn't over. And in this room, no one, not Emily, not Carla, not Nathan, was ready to give up. As the hours dragged into the early morning, Emily shared her story in fragments, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with the weight of 2 lost years. "After the fire," she said, her gaze distant but steady, "I searched everywhere. Every shelter, every clinic, flyers, phone calls. I even set out food in case he found his way home." Her fingers tightened around Max's paw, as though afraid he'd slip away if she let go. "They told me to move on," she continued, her voice breaking, "that even if he had survived, the forest around our house was too wild, too cruel. But I couldn't let go." Nathan swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He saw it now, the raw bond between them, deeper than time, deeper than the scars. Carla adjusted Max's IV, her hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. "He must have fought to stay alive," she said softly. "Fought every single day just to find his way back to you." Emily's lips quivered into a fragile smile. "That's my Maxie." The sky outside began to lighten, the first fragile threads of dawn breaking through the clouds. It felt like a promise, however small. And in that moment, Nathan realized something profound. Hope isn't always loud or bright. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like a woman refusing to leave her dog's side, whispering life back into his soul. Morning crept into the shelter, pale and uncertain. Golden streaks of sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting lines across the floor like bars of a cell. Time was their enemy now. Every minute counted. Nathan hadn't slept. His eyes were heavy, but adrenaline kept him sharp. Carla worked like a silent storm beside him, her focus laser-sharp as she adjusted Max's medications and checked his vitals with relentless precision. Emily never left the floor. She'd refused offers of food or rest, her gaze locked onto Max as if sheer willpower could keep his fragile heart beating. Then, a small miracle. Max shifted. It wasn't much, just a slow, dragging movement of his front paw, a faint twitch of his ears. But it was enough. Enough to make Emily's breath hitch in her throat. "Max?" she whispered, leaning closer. His eyes flickered open, hazy but aware. For a brief, precious moment, he gazed directly at her. And there, in that exhausted, war-torn stare, was recognition. Love. Loyalty that had weathered storms no one could imagine. Tears spilled freely down Emily's cheeks. "You're still with me," she breathed. Nathan felt the burn of unshed tears behind his eyes, but he held them back. There was work to do. Carla's voice broke the silence, tight but hopeful. "If he's responding, even slightly, there's a chance," she said. "But he needs more than we can give here." Nathan nodded grimly. "The university hospital?" Carla didn't hesitate. "They've got specialists, equipment. If we move fast—" Emily was already on her feet. "Let's go." Without wasting another second, they carefully lifted Max onto a makeshift stretcher. Nathan grabbed his keys, heart pounding in his chest. Time blurred as they rushed toward the van, the air thick with tension and silent prayers. As the engine roared to life, Emily cradled Max's head in her lap, whispering words of encouragement. "Stay with me, Maxie, just a little longer." Nathan drove like every red light was a personal insult, weaving through traffic with determination. Carla kept a steady hand on Max's IV, her eyes never leaving the precious bundle of fur fighting for life in Emily's arms. Minutes stretched into lifetimes as they raced toward the hospital. Each passing second felt like a gamble, a precarious roll of fate's dice. Finally, they screeched into the hospital driveway, staff already waiting with a gurney. Emily kissed Max's head softly before they wheeled him inside, her eyes fierce with hope. Nathan stood frozen for a moment, watching them disappear through the automatic doors. He realized in that instant that no matter what happened next, Max had already beaten the odds. He had survived the unimaginable. He had found his way home. But deep down, Nathan prayed for one more miracle. The waiting room was quiet, save for the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rustle of papers at the reception desk. Hours had passed, each one carved deep into Emily's heart. Her hands trembled as they rested in her lap, her eyes fixed on the swinging doors at the end of the hall. Nathan and Carla sat beside her, silent companions in this shared agony. When the vet finally emerged, his expression unreadable, Emily's breath caught in her throat. He paused, then offered a small, weary smile. "He's stable," he said softly. The relief was so overwhelming that Emily collapsed into Nathan's arms, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. Nathan felt his own chest loosen for the first time in what felt like days. "He's not out of the woods yet," the vet continued, "but he's a fighter. With time, care, and a little luck, I believe Max can make a full recovery." Emily wiped her tears, hope blooming fresh in her chest. "Can I see him?" The vet nodded. And moments later, she found herself by Max's side once again. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, but his eyes, oh, his eyes, were clear. Alive. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as she whispered, "You found your way back to me." Nathan stood at the doorway, watching this reunion with a full heart. Carla squeezed his arm gently, her own eyes damp with emotion. As they left the room to give Emily her moment, Nathan couldn't help but marvel at the unseen thread that had bound them all together. A bond stronger than time, fire, or fear. In the days that followed, Max's recovery became something of a small-town miracle. People donated to cover his care, strangers sent cards and supplies, and Emily never spent a moment away from his side. The community that once mourned his loss now rallied around his fight. And when Max finally walked out of the hospital on his own four paws, albeit slowly, Emily's joy lit up the entire block. Nathan knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. "Welcome home, buddy." Max wagged his tail, strong and sure. As the sun bathed the street in golden light, Emily smiled through her tears and whispered, "You never gave up on me, and I'll never give up on you." And as they walked away together, side by side, Nathan found himself wondering how many other lost souls were still out there waiting for their thread to be found. Now, I turn to you, friend. If you were Emily, would you have kept searching for 2 whole years? Would you have trusted that invisible thread of hope, even when everyone else said it was over? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story.